All right, another noon game, Dawn, is the biggest rivalry arguably in college football. Michigan at Ohio State, noon Eastern time on Fox. The playoff implications. So Ohio State is already in. They're already in the college football playoff. But they need to beat Michigan in order to secure a trip to the Big Ten championship game. So they're right now 10-1. They've beaten Penn State and they've beaten Indiana. Their only loss was to Oregon by 1 point at Oregon as well. But if Ohio State wins, they go to Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game in a rematch with Oregon. And then if they win that, they'll most likely be the number one team in the country entering the college football playoff. But even with a second loss to the Ducks, I would still say Ohio State's probably going to be like the number 5 seed in the college football playoff right now, which means then it would need to right now beat the Big 12 champion and then potentially Boise State in order to make the Final Four. So the 5 seed is a very, very coveted seed right now in the college football playoff.
Unless, just throwing this out there, unless it's South Carolina sitting there at 12. And that's a team, again, I would even if I'm Ohio State, I would.
With that O-line beat up the way it is, yeah, that could be a problem.
Unless, I think the seeding is going to be real interesting depending on the results of a lot of these games here, too.
But losing, if Ohio State does lose to Michigan for the 4th straight time, which, by the way, has not happened to Ohio State since the early 1990s, that would mean they likely concede their spot in the Big Ten title game to either Penn State or Indiana. So yes, Ohio State beat both those teams, but it would be a second conference loss for Ohio State, whereas Penn State and Indiana right now only have one conference loss, and Penn State plays Maryland, Indiana plays Purdue. Very unlikely that both those teams also lose those games as well. So they would drop down out of the Big Ten championship game and would drop down in the rankings as well and still be an at-large team, but they would be lower in the seeding than where they are right now, which is the 5 seed. So yes, Ohio State's in the playoff right now, but this is a big game for determining whether or not they can get to the Big Ten championship game and eventually maybe even be the number one team in the country heading into the college football playoff. But Dawn, you have the Michigan offense in this game. What should we be looking out for when they play maybe the best defense in college football?
Well, we're on our 12th game of this, and we've probably covered, half of the Michigan games, I'd say, somewhere around there, probably 5 or 6 of them, and the song remains the same. Michigan needs to run the football because they have struggled to throw it all year, and I believe you mentioned to me that Colston Loveland's status is up in the air. This game?
It's up in the air. Yeah, I think he's going to play, they said. It's most likely he's going to play, but he is up in the air.
Or whether he's banged up or especially if he's out, throwing the football is not going to be what the Wolverines want to do here. They want to run the ball with Kalel Mullings, with Donovan Edwards. In their 6 wins, they averaged 212 rushing yards, excluding sacks, because we do it right around here. And in their 5 losses, they've averaged 122. When they run the football, they can control the game and allow their defense to win it and do all of that. The problem is Ohio State is probably the best run defense that they've played all season. And you're talking about a team with a 93.5 run defense grade. And somehow that's only the 5th best in the country. That's incredible. 3.9 yards per carry they've allowed. That's the 6th best in the country. Less than a yard per carry before contact. Okay, this defensive line, we've talked about it all year. These are 2 of the best defensive lines in the country. But Ohio State's unit with Jack Sawyer, with Tyleik Williams, with JT Tuimoloau a while. Then you got Cody Simon at linebacker behind him making plays. Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom. Lathan Ransom, especially against the run, has been incredible this year. You've got just a primetime matchup of a team that really, really wants and needs to run the ball against an elite middle of this defense for Ohio State that's been stuffing teams all year in the middle. It's just an incredible unit they have right now from front to back. We've seen it a couple of times in person. All 3 layers of this defense have just done a fantastic job this year. They very well could be the best defense in the country, and their run defense will get tested by this Michigan offense that really needs to run the ball to have any chance in this game.
Yeah, and in every Michigan preview, it's always, all right, can Michigan run the ball? And then the other side of the ball is, all right, Michigan's defensive line, which has been arguably the best in America so far, can they take over this game? And again, I hate to do it one more time, but that's what we're talking about here with Michigan's defensive line. Because you just look at what they've done this year, Dawn, their defensive line, the best passer grade in the country, 3rd best run defense grade in the country, at a 91.6 overall grade, the 2nd highest graded defensive line in the nation, only behind Ole Miss. And you just look at what they've had on the defensive line right now. All 4 of their defensive line starters are on the PFF big board right now for the NFL draft. 2 of them are first-round prospects in the defensive tackles, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And you just look at the grading for Michigan this year. Really, the only thing going right for them is the defensive line. They're 1st in pass rush grade, like I said, 3rd in run defense grade. Passing grade, 122nd. Rushing grade, 67th. Even the rushing grade is average in college football this year. Receiving, 105th. Pass blocking grade, 85th. Run blocking grade, 56th. Coverage grade, 81st. Everything is average or well below average or among the worst in the country besides the defensive line. The defensive line is still playing at a national championship level with superstars on that defensive line. And Ohio State's offensive line is easily the team's biggest question mark right now because they've lost two of their best starters in left tackle Josh Simmons, who's currently a first-round prospect on PFF's big board right now, and center Seth McLaughlin. They're both out for the season with injuries. And since week 7, which is when Josh Simmons got hurt against Oregon, they have a 60.7 offensive line grade. That is 104th in college football right now. If Michigan has any chance of keeping this game close at all, it will be because this defensive line for Michigan dominates Ohio State's offensive line. And when your offensive line can't block for you, I don't care how talented your quarterback is, how talented your running backs are, how talented your receivers are. It's really hard to do anything offensively if your offensive line is getting beat every single play.
Correct. And I actually thought when we saw Ohio State play Indiana last week, I thought Indiana did a pretty nice job, especially stopping the run. I thought their defensive line played reasonably well, and then they just ran out of gas when their offense wasn't doing anything. But, the guy I'm looking at in this game is their center now. He was Carson Hinsman, who was the starting center for Ohio State last year. This year he was a backup. Now with McLaughlin hurt, he's back to the starting center role, getting a rematch. Kind of struggled, understandably, in this game last season. That's a guy against Graham and Grant on the inside that I'm looking at who's going to have to be effective. But I think we've seen for stretches this year where Ohio State has looked their best when they distribute the ball to the outside quickly, right? Get out on the perimeter and let the athletes win in space. Because of these offensive line issues, I don't think they've run the ball between the tackles quite as well as we thought they would going into the season, especially lately. So it is going to be a big factor. How do they choose to control this pass rush? And even in the run game, is Ohio State going to be able to run between the tackles, or they're going to have to get creative and get to the outside? And, last week against Indiana, we saw them run a little outside zone, get out to the edge. Yep. We've seen them do some jet sweeps and even run some screens as an extension of it. So I'm curious to see how Ohio State handles this, because it's going to be a story with every game that they play from here in. It's just how are they going to pass protect? How are they going to block between the tackles? It's going to be a big thing, especially on that left side of the line.
Yeah, it's no longer about can Will Howard win the national title. It's about the offensive line now. That's the big question for Ohio State against arguably the best defensive line in the country, at least the second best right now in defensive line grade. So, all right, Dalton. A lot of Ohio State fans would say beating Michigan is more important than even winning a national title. Will they beat Michigan, or for the 4th straight year, will the Wolverines take down the Buckeyes?
I think the Buckeyes, they buck the trend. I have them. I have Ohio State 35-13, and I just think look. I know Michigan scored 50 last week on Northwestern, and a lot of that. Well, they played Northwestern, right? Ohio State, take out the Oregon game. They gave up 32 points in that game. In all of their other games, they're giving up less than 9 points a game.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
It's the only game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving up less than 9 points a game. We saw against Penn State, they gave up 6 points offensively to Penn State. Last week, they gave up 15, but the second touchdown was late in the game when it was over, right? Ohio State, this might be the best defense in the country, and Michigan, for most of the year, has struggled to score more than maybe 24 points in a handful of games, and obviously the Northwestern game last week skews some of the numbers, but I have a hard time seeing how Michigan's going to consistently score. If they're going to find a way to win this game, it's going to be like 17-13. But yeah. I don't think it's happening. I think Ohio State's going to finally get their revenge after the last 3 years, 35-13.
Yeah, I struggle to see Michigan scoring 20 points in this game. I have a 34-10 Ohio State winning it right now. I think Ohio State's defense, like you said, is playing like the best in America. Michigan's offense has like nothing really going for it, especially if Colson Loveland is out, and I think he'll play.
And I think there's a statement to be made that the last 3 years Michigan has won this game because they were the more physical team.
Yeah,
I think Ohio State's going to want to make a statement that that's not the case this time.
There's a lot of Ohio State players that want to make a statement. I've seen a lot of,
and like you mentioned, the stakes here. It's not like there's not any stakes as far as the Big Ten goes. They need to win this game to get to face Oregon and win a Big Ten title. So it's also extremely an important game, not just for the pageantry, but for what's in front of them as well.
And get a first round bye. And I know there's some Ohio State fans saying, "Well, I want the 5 seed anyways." It was like you're not getting a 5 seed if you lose to Michigan either. So it's like you need to win this game, period, in order to do it. And I think they will. I think they'll dominate Michigan in this game and win by multiple scores. I think 34-10 was my predicted final score in the game between Ohio State and Michigan. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.